Here are 9 urban myths that are actually true, so watch out! Number 9. Eaten by pigs. Ever heard the saying, "we'll feed you to the pigs"? Well, this isn't just a vernacular convention, but a phrase that's based on real fact. A while back in 2012, a Vietnam War veteran who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder was looking for a way to cope with what he had seen during the war. In the end, the man turned to raising pigs as a therapeutic exercise. The man's family said that the pigs had really changed his life for the better. Unfortunately, the pigs would also be the cause of the man's demise in the end. One day, the veteran went out to feed his livestock. What happened next is still being debated today, as there was no body to do an autopsy on to discern the cause of death. It's speculated that a heart attack caused the veteran to fall into the pig pen, or that some other outside influence made him faint or something. Whatever caused him to fall, in the end, over 99% of his body was consumed by the very same animals that he had come to love. Pigs are more vicious than you think. Number 8. Death by Wedgie. A good many of us did a lot of questionably intelligent things when we were young. TPing the neighbor's house on Halloween, or picking on our little sibling just because we could. The list really just goes on from there. There's a myth that's been floating around a good many years, though, that many might think is just a cautionary tale, dreamed up by parents and told to their kids to prevent them from picking on anyone who couldn't fight back. To be fair, the idea that an atomic wedgie can kill really does sound pretty darn far-fetched. The truth is even more odd. It turns out that there is a reported case of a wedgie killing a man. Again, a man, not a child, as the legend falsely goes. A few years ago, a 34-year-old man got in an argument with his stepfather of almost 60 years of age. So what did the grown man do to retaliate against his stepfather? Well, he gave him an atomic wedgie to rival them all. Unfortunately, both of the men were likely drunk, based upon what the police who reported the case have said, and the stepfather's throat became ensnared by the waistband of his underwear, after which the aging man was strangled to death by his own drawers. Quite an embarrassing way to go, but apparently it's true. Number 7. Dead body under mattress. Legend goes that a couple checks into a rundown, creepy hotel. Okay, maybe not creepy, maybe just a Motel 6 or something. Everything's going fine until they detect a peculiar smell wafting up from under the place that they're supposed to be sleeping, their rented bed. So what they find is always the same: a cold and rotting dead body. This sounds like something that would be told around a raging campfire with s'mores licking all over the listener's hands. However, there are actually more than a few reported cases of bodies actually being found under motel and hotel beds. For example, Richard Kuklinski was a serial killer who poisoned a man before strangling him with the cord of a lamp. After this, he stuffed his victim's body into the bed frame of a motel room in New Jersey. There are other cases of this happening too, so be careful where you check in for the night. Number 6. Very real Halloween decorations. Halloween is a time of tricks, treats, and for some, practical jokes. Sometimes, though, the joke can go a bit too far. There is an urban myth that a man or sometimes a teenager performs a fake hanging trick to scare their friends, or whoever. Then something goes wrong and they accidentally hang themselves. Since everyone thinks it's a trick, no one saves them. In New Jersey, a teenager named Brian Jewell died just like this. In the state of North Carolina, a 15-year-old accidentally hanged himself while performing at a gallows act during a Halloween party. I get scared easily, so I stay away from these kinds of things. I've never even heard of this kind of party. Only a few years ago, a boy named Caleb Rebb died while performing a similar act. The people watching him fake hang himself were completely unaware that his act had turned to reality, and they thought that his kicking, gasping, and screaming were all faked, while in reality, they were gasps for help. Number 5. Unwanted Guest. There could be all kinds of things lurking in your house: a monster in your closet, a ghost under the bed, an intruder in the attic. All of these are terrifying things that many of us have dreamt up and imagined seeing during our childhood. Even just the thought of it is pretty terrifying. Most of the time, parents simply tell their children that there's just no chance of there being anything scary and evil hanging around the dark corners of the closet. Our houses are safe places where we can just relax, right? But what if I told you that there were quite a few cases of intruders existing undetected in the homes of unknowing families? There have actually been people who have heard weird noises and seen movement out of the corners of their eyes, only to discover that they were actually seeing someone lurking in the darkness. At first, they thought they were seeing ghosts or thought it was a trick of the eye. Nope. In Kasuya, Japan, a Japanese man who was living alone stumbled on the fact that a 58-year-old woman had been secretly living in the upper part of his closet for the better part of a year. She was stealing food and water from his house and showered only when the man of the house wasn't watching. This case was practically harmless, although pretty creepy, but there was another case of an entire family being killed by an intruder who had been living in their home for a very, very long time. The murder investigators found the evidence of where the murderer had been staying, but the actual man or woman was never found. Number 4. Brain-eating bugs. Hope you aren't afraid of bugs. If so, maybe skip this number. As the legend of the brain-eating bug goes, a very, very unlucky person is sleeping and a very nasty bug crawls straight into their ear. The victim of the bug's cranial invasion then wakes up to a terrible headache and pain in their head, only to put off going to the doctors for some time. Unfortunately, the victim finds out that they've waited too long and that their brain has already become the lunch of the same bug that has invaded their skull. Many would consider this just a terrible, over-the-top horror story. Sometimes, though, terrible stories can also be grounded in fact, as this list has probably already taught you. From brain-eating bacteria to flesh-eating worms and beetles, there are creatures out there that can and will nibble on our gray matter if given the chance. Does anyone know where the bug spray is? I'm starting to feel stuff crawling on me. Number 3. Buried alive. Back in the 19th century and even way before, cemeteries would sometimes establish and install complex systems to prevent the burying of living people under the earth. Strings were installed in coffins that would ring bells and alert gravediggers to which grave needed to be immediately dug up. Believe it or not, being buried alive was a real problem back in the days before medical technology became more advanced. William Tebb, a 19th century doctor, found that there were almost 300 cases of premature burial that he could dig up from the medical records. Perhaps even more scary, he also discovered at least 6 instances where desiccation or the embalming of living victims was either carried out or had begun to be. And these are only the cases where buried living people were discovered directly after their burial. There have been many times that during the transport of a cemetery to a new location, claw marks have been discovered on the insides of coffins, indicating that an even greater number of people have been wrongly entombed in the past. These reports are definitely shocking, but premature burial accidents have also happened as late as the year 2011, when a Russian heart attack victim had gone into a coma and was pronounced dead by the physicians. The woman later woke up at her own funeral where she had another heart attack, and then she did actually die. Number 2. Killer clown. Afraid of clowns? Well, maybe you should be. With all the movies and scary stories and old urban legends circling around clowns, it's pretty easy to understand why some people's hair raises on end when they see a red nose. Anyone seen It yet? The classic story of the killer clown goes a bit like this. A babysitter is watching 2 small children. When she goes to put the kids to sleep, afterward she finds a creepy clown statue in the family's living room. The girl is so creeped out by the statue that when she calls the parents of the kids to report that everything is okay, she mentions it to the couple. Yeah, everything's fine, there's just, a clown statue in the living room. The couple then utter a sentence that's straight out of a nightmare. They don't own a clown statue. So the babysitter runs to grab the kids while the parents call the police. This is just a story, but what if I told you that there is a real-life story of a killer clown? John Wayne Gacy was a successful and respected businessman in his community who liked to dress up as a clown for birthday parties and to entertain sick children at the local hospital. He sounds like a great guy, right? But in actuality, what everyone thought about him was wrong. In the end, Gacy, or Pogo as he went by when he wore his white face mask and clown nose, tortured and killed over 33 teenage boys before he was caught by the police. Number 1. Stolen organs. This one is the worst. A tourist is drugged at a bar after being seduced by a beautiful woman, or a man, or just jumped in some godforsaken alley somewhere and wakes up in a bathtub of ice, besides a note that tells them to get to the nearest hospital fast if they want to live, because their kidneys are missing. The doctors are shocked by their story and the fact that they're missing some random organ that varies depending on who's telling the story. This is an urban legend that sounds almost realistic enough to be true, and, well, it turns out that it is. In 2008, 3 men were lured to a hospital in India where they had been promised work. What happened next was pretty awful. They were held at gunpoint and drugged before waking up with terrible, terrible scars and a lot of missing parts. They are now currently alive thanks to the support of machines. That should be enough to start getting you ready for Halloween. Thanks for watching and be sure to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!